Add it up. Okay, all right. Add it up. Add it up.
Hey, what's going on, data heads? Thank you guys for coming back. Today is Wednesday. Happy Wednesday. So a couple of housekeeping rules, then we will get started. For those that are new, we'll just go through the process. In the bottom right-hand corner, there's a timer. It started at 45 minutes. We go 45 minutes studying, and then once we get done with that, we have a 5-minute break. Once we get done with that, we come back for 5 minutes. We take a quick quiz on things that we have learned, and then we are out of here. It is exactly 8:01 Central Standard Time, so we will go ahead and get started. Wherever you're watching me from, there is some place for you to be able to ask questions, whether that's Twitter or Facebook or wherever you're watching me at. If you want to ask a question, go ahead and type it in. I can bring it on the screen for everybody to see. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll just go over kind of where we are and what you're looking at right now. So what this is we are actually studying out of this book. So in case you want to get the actual book, it is the Data Study Guide. We are just doing the digital version. So this is the Kindle version of that. And we will go ahead and take a look and see where we are. So a couple of things we do. We use yellow color. Yellow is things that we believe are going to be on the exam. We use the color blue for anything that he describes inside of the book. Mike Chapple, which is the author of the book. Anything that Mike goes through that might help you to be able to explain what you do as a data scientist or data analyst in this case, being able to just explain what you do to someone who's not very familiar with the data science industry. We use pink for taking a quiz, which Monday, if you remember, we were taking a quiz on Monday, and we finished that quiz up. Orange are things that are personal to me. So when I get ready to get done with the book, I can print out my orange and print out things from my yellow, and that's what we would study off of if necessary. But we do have a bank of questions that are offered through the book, which is what we take our quiz on. So let's go ahead and grab your coffee. And today it is just bulletproof coffee like last time. I just have it in a different cup. I decided not to have it in my Ember cup. I'm just going to have it in here. And let's go ahead and get started. Let's dive in. So we were on page, I believe it was 143. So we were on page 143 and we had finished this up. He was talking about a veterinary clinic and being able to, if you were creating databases and how those databases combine and how they talk to each other. Oh, he does go ahead to explain what the remember I was saying on Monday, like I could not remember what these meant. I just knew that this meant that the tables were connected, but I didn't remember what the little, what I call the chicken feet, what that meant. Okay, so he says the first component of the terminator indicates whether the relationship between the two entities is optional or required. So he's talking about if we were to put a line straight through this here, he's referring to the circle and the plus. So circle means optional. I will just call it a cross. So the circle means these are optional. Crosses mean that this is required. And I think the way that I'm going to remember that is just like going to church on Sunday. Like when I grew up, going to church on Sunday was not optional. So you had to go to church on Sunday. So that's why I would just assist the cross being a requirement that says that whatever it is that's being done is required. And as we split this before, now the things that are on the right hand side speak to if there is one instance. So this is right here, this is optional one instance, this is required one instance, this is optional multiple or many instances, and this is required many instances. I can see this being a test question. What is a urinary? I was going to say urinary. It is not urinary. It's unary. A unary relationship is when an entity has a connection with itself. I can see that being a test question. Definitely can see that being a test question. And then he is explaining that unary concept as it relates to a manager having multiple employees. binary relationship connects two entities. A ternary relationship connects three entities. For example, you might use a ticket entity to connect a venue, a performing artist, and a price. Okay, so we have unary, binary, binary meaning two, and ternary, which is three, which I think is interesting. They didn't call it trinary relationship. Binary relationships are the most common, so two entries, and they're easy to explore, whereas unary and ternary are comparatively complex and rare. There is usually, like, when you're looking at the, like something like this, there is usually a way that they all connect to one location. So like the animal will connect. Okay, so this is the animal ID, person ID. Okay, so these all stay the same. Okay, got it. And then where's the telephone number in here? Like of the person, I think that that would go in the person section. If there's somebody that, if you guys see it and I'm not seeing it because I don't see the telephone number in this table. So like if a person had, maybe they have it under phone and I'm just looking for telephone. Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing they forgot inside of here in this particular table would be like, because this just says like, title would be Mr., Ms., Doctor, or something like that. And I think that the person, the telephone number would go in the person category. Apart from being a helpful picture, the entity relationship diagram also serves as a relational database blueprint. The ability to read ERDs helps you understand the structure of a relational database. ERDs are particularly useful when formulating how to retrieve information from a database that is spread across multiple tables, because the diagrams allow you to visualize the connection between the entries. Entities, sorry, not entries, entities. functional model and create a physical design. That could be a question. This one about completing all of the works results in a diagram known as a schema. That is possible. Hmm. What I think is interesting is that these are almost like the classes. Um, I don't know what the PK stands for, but I do recognize almost like these classes, like animal ID has to be a number, animal name can't have, it's a variable chart, variable characters, and I think the maximum is 50. That's what this means. Animal type would also be variable character with a maximum of 20. Breed name could be like you might have a varchar, let's say that you wanted the breed's name. For whatever reason, the breed was over, could be over 100 characters long. I don't see that being the case, but maybe it is. Um, and so you would need to change this from a varchar 50 to a varchar 100. Dates, height would be numeric, weight would be numeric, animal ID. What I think is interesting, what's the difference between number and numeric? Because he has number on on an animal ID, but he doesn't have, so height is numeric as opposed to the chart schema of number. And then animal ID will go in the center. Okay, got that. Associative table is important because associative table is the it is the part in between. So like if you were trying to say, I'll just use a car dealership kind of a understanding. This one he's using a veterinary clinic. But let's say that in the database you've got cars that come into the service department, and we'll use just the service department. So you bring your car into the service department. All right, you are a individual at the service department, but let's consider you have a GMC. Okay, you're taking your GMC into the service department. Okay, when you arrive at the service department, so let's say you have a GMC Terrain. So that GMC, when you come inside of that location, how would they be able to tell your GMC from someone else's GMC? Or GMCs that they have at the dealership that are not inside of the service department? You have to be able to bring together two databases. So they have to be able to check a database of all the GMCs that they have used or new at the dealership. They also then have another database of just service customers Okay, and then your name ties, and that's what this whole animal person portion in the middle, your name ties in between that. And so when someone gets ready to query by typing in your name into a system, they'll be able to see, okay, you have arrived, you're at the service department, and there are different things specifically given to you. So let's say your license plate number, the VIN number of your car. Those are things that they can then say, okay, obviously that VIN number is not going to match any VIN number that is in their new or used database. Okay, now they go through the service database, and the service database will say, okay, we have record of this person coming in to get service, or they're a new customer if you don't have a database. But that's how they tie it together. That's something that we don't think about. We just kind of pull in and we get our car service. But if you were thinking about this on a much more nailed down, or if you were thinking about this as you're pinning this down and you're going, well, how are they able to search my name and see previous services? So there is a database that's kept specifically on your service. Every time you go in to get an oil change, tire rotation, things like that, that's all kept in a database. And so they go to that database and pull. And there's someone who's built that database that then has to check to make sure your car isn't part of an inventory that they have. That's why your car never gets put back out on the showroom floor, because they can go in and say this VIN number should not be, it's not considered new. So that's just kind of a basic level, but that's what this whole thing is. This is just the written out version of what I just went through. So the associative table is important because you, as the person bringing your car into service, is really the pivoting point of that, because you're in each different database. So remembering our lines, so these are two crosses. So two crosses would mean that there is required. So this is required, and there is more than one relational. That there is one relation here. So this says that, hey, something in here is required from this table, and it is one thing, which in this case is animal ID. And then they're also saying, as it goes from here, if you're going to the right, you're saying, hey, this table has one thing in common, but there's multiple parts in the table. Same thing out here, and they're saying, okay, we took the person ID here and the animal ID here to make up our next table, which says they titled the animal person. And this hasn't even tied in yet to like procedures or medications, as per the last table we were looking at. So if we were looking at, like, I'm sure he's probably going to go forward. Okay, that's a different thing. All right, so when we were talking about this table and the way that he did it, where he made one table, because all of these tables have connections to each other. These relationships have relationships to each other, but when he brought it together here, what you don't see is like, okay, where is the medications that are given? Where is, like I was saying, where is the telephone number inside of here, inside of the person's chart? But these all tie together. You know what actually just made sense to me after I did that? I always wondered why you couldn't just enter, like before, when I was much younger and I was working in medical records at Portsmouth Naval Hospital. It was my first duty station in the military, and right out of boot camp. And I remember at the time, I kept wondering, like, what differences does it make? Because let's say that you had a medical record, and at that time, medical records were not electronic. That wasn't we used to actually have to go pull medical records. And at the time, Portsmouth Naval Hospital, you got to think this was like 1996, 1997, somewhere in there, 1998-ish, they were switching over from paper records to digital records. And at the time, I just remember we were entering things and I couldn't figure out if I was entering a piece of paper, okay, let's say at that time your vital signs were kept in the front of your medical record on the left-hand side. So when you're getting ready to put them in the electronic record, it would ask you specifically what it was. Okay, it was you're taking your vitals. I couldn't understand, well, if I'm entering the vitals on John Smith, okay, but we also have a record that says Smith John, why I was getting an error. Now it makes more sense, obviously years later and experience more, but now it makes sense because the database at the time will look at John Smith is one person, Smith John is another person, even though the record, physical record is the same. Someone just wrote Smith John and it was an error, but the machine would catch that and say, no, you can't put this because you can't put John Smith in Smith John's folder because they are into the computer system, they're two different people. I'm holding the record and I know that there is no John Smith. There is no Smith John, there's just John Smith. That finally came to fruition in my head to understand why that was a thing. You know what I think is interesting? I think that this would be rather interesting to spend some time with people who actually create these actual schemas. And I believe they're called data engineers, but don't quote me on that one. But I think they're data engineers and they go through to build schemas or they maintain this system. Because there's got to be somebody, once this is created, if you think about it, there has to be something where if a person creates this, like schema, someone has to maintain it and make sure, let's say, for example, you have someone that has a last name. In this case, we'll just use what's here. So this says varchar 50. So variable character 50. Maximum character length is 50. So if, let's say you have somebody who had a last name, or they have 3 last names, okay? So let's say they have 3 last names, and it is more than like, it's funny, sorry. You know, it's so funny. Like just then I was explaining and my glasses go off to tell me that to explain, and I didn't know this, but I'm going to tell you this because maybe you didn't know. Okay, so you can have up to 6 last names. You can have 2 from your last name, 2 from your mother, and 2 from your father. Okay, so just then they were explaining that, you know, she was in my ear saying you can have up to 6 last names. I didn't know that was a thing, but that will well be beyond this whole like 50 variable character. So there has to be someone who goes in and says, okay, we're going to take this from varchar 50 to varchar 100, because the last name could be really long, especially if you've kept your last name, you know, you've kept your parents' last name. That's for, then you took your own last name because maybe you took your spouse's last name. Now you've got well more than 50. So there has to be someone who maintains these charts to make sure that they stay updated, because otherwise you'd run out of, this will be archaic very quickly. Okay, let me go back so I can see. Okay, so you have a person ID. Okay. So you have a person ID, which you have a unique person ID. title, first name, middle name. Now, what's interesting about the way that this table is filled out as well is because when we would get ready to get this data and you were trying to clean it, because let's say Paul Tooby, Paul does not have a middle name. So when you get ready to clean this data, you would have to go through this data, and I don't know if you'd have this as like a null, because you can't just go and require it. And if you say, let's say you're querying the database and you're asking for everybody's first, middle, and last name, because let's say you're going to put together a mailing list and you need the names accordingly, it wouldn't give you, well, it would give you Paul, it would give you Paul anyway because you requested the first name. But let's say you were just trying to do something with middle and last name for whatever reason. There's nothing in Paul's middle name, so that's just curious. All right, the person entity. Okay, so the person entity. Simply the person entity from figuring corresponds to table 32. Until I started actually explaining this didn't make sense to me. The primary keys and what they're talking about when you see primary keys. That's what the PK means. Duh. Okay, that's what the PK means. That's funny. Remember I said I don't know what this PK means, but that's primary key. That's what this stands for. And so primary keys are things that are required in order for the database, in order for the tables to connect, they have to have a key to connect to one another. Okay, we'll just keep that basic. And so when you go through, like, the reason why you wouldn't want to have, like, what I was asking myself at the time is, for example, why would you not use animal name as your primary key? Because the primary key, I think of it like if we were doing a folder on the desktop, right? If you're doing a folder on the desktop, because most of you guys have worked in IT or have some experience in at least a desktop. So if you're putting a folder on a desktop, the label that you put on the outside of that folder, so let's say we're just going to call that test, okay? So test is going to be one folder, and then we're going to say class is going to be one other folder. So they're both out on the out on the desktop. Fine. So what you're trying to create is something that ties both of those folders together, because there's material that we're going to put in those folders. But in order to bring those folders where you almost think of it like a legend, if you will, or like a table of contents, so that you know, hey, if you're trying to get to the test folder, here's the key for the test folder. Here is the key for so inside of those folders, so inside of the test folder is going to have a unique name. So let's say it's going to be test 1, 2, 3. Fine. That's what we're going to use as a key, and what we're going to put inside of our table of contents or our legend is going to be test 1, 2, 3, so that the person doesn't have to go into each table or into each folder in our example and figure out what's in there. All they have to do is say, okay, I need to find something that's in the test folder. Fine, you use this test 1, 2, 3. That's the ID for it. So that's the thing of understanding the primary key. Like I said, it didn't make sense to me when I was taking the Google classes. Even though I went through it, it was when I saw this and actually walked through it and was having to explain it, that made more sense. So all it is it's what's tying all of these things together. So if I wish I could color these, but I don't think you can color over the graphics. On my iPad, I think that we could. So I could, and maybe next time I'll bring my iPad in. That way we can go through this, and then I will be able to at least like highlight this specific part, and then to show you guys like how they connect to each other. But that's basically what the primary key is. No, no, no. Come on in. You're fine. You're fine. We're just kind of getting hot and heavy into like databases and relational databases at this point, and how they connect to each other. And he's really breaking down the details of how the tables connect is the best way I would say it. Okay, what was that other letter? So it's FK. ID is a synthetic primary key, and the number 3 is arbitrarily assigned to Hazel. Okay, so sequences of rows does not matter. For example, we might want to retrieve data. Now this makes me want to go out, and I have another book. I'll show you guys. I have another book on practical SQL. Okay, and this will definitely end up being a really fun book, I think, to go through now as I start to get like the floodgates are starting to open. That's the best way I can say it. Like, I have taken some SQL classes and you go through the motions, but it's very different. One of the things when you realize when you're sitting with like a study group like this, like people ask me, well, why would you stream when you study and you could just study by yourself? There is a difference when their minds connecting like we are right now, and that you're able to sit and watch, whether you've got me on in your ears while you're traveling someplace, or if you're actually looking at the screen and trying to understand what I'm talking about. Even that little bit of a struggle in the brain can help you to learn something, and you intentionally trying, like I'm intentionally trying, not passively reading information. I'm intentionally trying to understand what's in front of me visually. So you guys get to see me struggle, you get to see me be right and wrong and things like that. And I get to bounce things off of you guys to see like, oh, okay, am I understanding this right? All right, so we've kind of beat this far as this table is concerned, at least from everything that I can see. I'm just thinking about this like when you get ready to query it and you get to look behind the scenes of what's in the database, then to see like, hey, what am I going to have to clean up? And what I mean by that is, if the person is given an option when they're doing inputting, let's say Mr. Paul Tupi, okay, So as they're entering the name, the customer's name, in this case, this database, um, the number is going, the person's ID is automatically going to be generated. But if they're given an opportunity to write, which I think for title, he gave varchar 10. So if it's varchar 10 and the person's title can be up to 10, because you could be a doctor, a miss, things like that. So what if they were to enter Mr. period or Miss period, but sometimes they don't do period. Okay, even though MS still is MS, or MR is still MR, but to a computer, MR dot is different than MR. They're not the same thing. So just be aware of that part, because I mean, that is a real thing. If you guys are looking in the corner, the bottom right hand corner, you know that you are going on break here in just over 5 minutes. And then we will come back and we'll go through our quiz, and like that, we're already done. So there is the term. Okay, so here in that table, remember when I was saying I don't know what FK is? So this is PK, which is primary key, and now FK, he just defined that is foreign key. So a foreign key is one or more columns in one table that points to a corresponding column in a related table. Lots of conversation about this, just simply meaning there is something inside of a table, because right now he was saying, let's say that you belong to the Mangoe family. Right now, nowhere in this table, because this data information is just your that's just your person. So there has to be a primary key that ties these two databases together. So you can say this is the person and then this is their dog. So in order for you to do that, person ID has to connect to animal ID, and that's why this table is important. We're at 3 minutes. I'm sorry, but that does not work very well. Don't get me wrong, I like those. I love those little cloths and all of that stuff. But for some reason, they just don't work as well as just grabbing. That's much better. So animal ID connects to a different person ID, and person ID comes from here. So that's 1,000, sorry, that's 10,003 and 10,004. Interesting. Now this actually makes sense. Or a lot of times why they just have the wrong, they'll put your name wrong because someone entered it incorrectly in the system. Okay. All right, we're gonna push along to this next page right here so we can see what was pushed. You guys have less than 30 seconds and you go on your break, and we're gonna get ready for our quiz. So we are gonna put our bookmark here. So we're good to go. We are on page 151 if you are looking in the digital book, it is 151. All right, enjoy your break, you guys. an opportunity to go through. All right, so welcome back for all of you earlies. All right, let's go ahead and get our quiz done. All right, so Juan wants to understand the average shoulder height of elephants and Manar. What best describes the data set that he needs? Sample? Who manages a software development organization that writes primarily in Python. He wants to leverage his team's existing knowledge to move data between transactional systems and a data warehouse. And what phase are Python skills most relevant? I remember this from load. Since Python is a programming language external to relational databases, the existing skills of Ferruccio's teams are most relevant to the transform phase. The extract and load phases typically use database-centric utilities, and update is not an official phase. So it's the transform phase. Javier wants to illustrate the relationship between height and weight. What type of chart should he use? Bar. It is scatter. Cora wants to highlight the fact that, Cora wants to highlight the fact that the report she is developing is for internal use only. What can she do to emphasize that fact? For internal use only, you can use a watermark. Simone works for an organization that uses the Cognos analytics suite. What component of the suite could she use to best create scorecards for business leaders? I don't even know what Cognos is. I guess this. It is feasible that Simone might be able to create a scorecard using any of the tools. However, the Metric Studio is the best tool for the job because it is designed to create scorecards for business leaders. I'm assuming that when we get to this portion inside of the book, I will understand more about what the Cognos Analytics Suite is, but that doesn't ring a bell right now. All right, so 40. So I didn't skip any. I didn't know that was a thing that we could do, but here is, we might be able to get, because this is like the bank of questions that they give you. And for this last couple of minutes, What term is used to describe when the same data elements appear in multiple places within the system? I don't know that. Redundant data. We got 1 minute, let's go. What is the last stage of the analytics process? Destroy or destroy? Reporting and communications. Okay, got it. What is the most popular programming language to use today? Python. What is the first stage of the analytics process? Gather, data acquisition. What are the 3 phases of the ETL process? Don't know that one. All right, so you guys have 12 seconds left. Here is where we are as far as the questions we've gotten right versus where we are. So I'll see you guys this weekend like normal. All right.